In this video, we're going to take a look at what's new and cool in Microsoft security and compliance. This is a busy one, so you better stay tuned. Greetings fellow YouTubers, Andy Malone, Microsoft MVP. Welcome to the channel, especially, hey, if this is your first visit. You know, the world of security and compliance never ceases to amaze me, and it's constantly evolving and constantly changing. And it's super important that you need to keep your skills up to date. So in today's episode, I'm going to take a look at what's new and cool in Microsoft security, and also we're going to talk about Microsoft Purview, what's new and cool, and so on. Now, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, then please support me by going up there, hitting that subscribe button, ringing the bell, and you'll be notified of any new postings. And if you enjoy the video, please bump the like button. It does make a difference. Now, I'd also like to just mention my new Patreon site. I've got a page on Patreon now, so if you want to show me a little bit more love, then please go ahead and become a Patreon. Benefits can include extended videos, including this one today. There'll be an extended version of this video. In addition, you'll also have lots of exclusive trainings and even live casts as well. So watch out for that. There's some super cool stuff coming. Check out the details here. And if you have any comments and questions about this, or in fact any of my other sessions, as always, get those down below. Just a quick shout out for a couple of new members, Rene Coffey and Jay Muro, who have signed up to the site. Guys, I really appreciate your support and welcome as premium subscribers. All right, so I think without any further ado, let's jump in and start learning. So my first choice today, I'm going to take you into the Microsoft Entra Admin Center. I'm going to scroll down here, and you can either go to the Protection tab here, which is essentially a shortcut, or of course you can go to the rolled up option here as well. So I'm going to extend that. I'm going to come into Identity Protection. So here in Identity Protection, this looks pretty much the same as it's always, but we now have a brand new dashboard in Microsoft Entra. Now in the past, I've used things like identity protection to monitor, let's say, privileged accounts, such as CFOs, CEOs, CIOs, administrators, and so on. And you can create a couple of policies for that. But looking at this new dashboard, I have to say, we now have a lot more detail about potential identity attacks. And I honestly now think it's about time we start using this for everyone. So just to give you an idea, I've got a couple of policies here. I've got one called a user risk policy. So what are the risks of these users? Now, in the past, I've chosen individual users, but what I'm going to choose here is all users. And I'm going to say if there's a high risk, any users of high risk and above, or medium risk and above, so you can set the level there that you want. For the purpose of this demo, I'm going to set this as medium and above. I'm going to say, what do you want to do? Sorry, just click that. I'll click on done. And it says, okay, if there is an incident, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to block access or allow access? Now, I'm going to say for the purpose of this demo, allow access and require a password change. I just want to come in here just to the users, all users. What you might want to do though is exclude an admin account. So I have an admin account here called CDX. If you don't do that, potentially, of course, you could potentially lock yourself out. So just be aware of that. And you might want to have some kind of break glass account with this. All right, now I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to enable that policy. I'm going to click on that. And I'm going to go ahead now and click on the sign-in risk policy. So what's the sign-in risk policy? So again, in the past, I've chosen individual users. You can do that for folks that are signing in remotely. Again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select everyone and I'm going to exclude my admin accounts. Okay. Again, make sure that you may be using a break glass account and so on. I'm going to enable that. I'm going to set the high risk, and I'm going to require multi-factor authentication if there's any kind of attempted sign in remotely. So I'm going to go ahead, click on done and save. And that's pretty much it to set that up. The other thing that you can also do is you can enforce a multi-factor registration policy as well. And this is essentially where you're forcing everybody to go down the road of multi-factor authentication. That's fine if you want to do it that way. Personally, I like the conditional access way because you've got a little bit more control and you can choose the different authentication methods. But that's just my choice. Now, what is really good is once it starts monitoring, obviously there's nothing monitoring at the moment. You can see at the moment there's no attacks. But you can see that we now have a number of additional reports. So it shows me the number of potential high-risk users and if there are kind of any risky actions. And what we mean by this is we're talking about things like impossible travel. So I'm sure you're aware that if you're using the multi-factor authenticator app, it often asks you for a number challenge. And along with that number challenge, you also get asked for your location. And this is useful. So if you're in London right now and suddenly there's an attempt to access an app from Singapore, you know that's impossible travel. So that is some kind of identity threat. So we have that, and that's really nice actually. So this new portal currently in preview is absolutely awesome. Now, in terms of those reports that I mentioned, you can see that we get sign-in reports. This is just an example one here. So you can see that this user is signed in, shows you where the role that the user has. You also get the recent, if there's a risky sign-in. So it shows me if there are any risky sign-ins from this user. And also risk detections not linked to a sign-in. So that could be, for example, through a device or an app or something like that. And you also get that risk history. Now, the interesting thing here is, again, you can have a look at those risky detections individually. And if you think that that user has been compromised, you can then click onto this and that will then lock that user's account. And at the very least, you could then reforce that user to re-authenticate through multi-factor authentication. So you can either block the user and you can also investigate the user as well by using tools like Defender and also Sentinel. So that's a really nice feature. Of course, you can also initiate risky workload identities as well. So workload identities are for example, if you're using service accounts for things like databases or devices or processes within your organization. So that can be useful. And again, that's kind of newer as well. Shows you the risky sign-ins report. So you do get that risky sign-ins report. And again, if there are any risk detections. Now, these are not new. We've had these for a while, but the ability to see them at a glance, that is new and that is really useful. So again, there's no data here, but I'm sure you get the idea. So that's the new updated identity protection. Now, on the topic of Microsoft Entra, you may have heard of a new feature called Global Secure Access. And although at the moment this is currently in public preview, there is no details on pricing and full availability yet. To get started, you basically have a couple of choices. You've got access to the Entra Internet Access Program. However, at the moment, this is just in private preview and you need to apply for it. That's the good news. The bad news is you can't. There's nowhere to apply for it. So I think this is a closed private preview at the moment. Now, we also have the Entra Private Access Program, so particularly useful if you're in a multi-cloud scenario or if you've got a network infrastructure on premises or dispersed throughout the world that's maybe connected through a third party or telecoms provider. You've maybe purchased dedicated lines and so on. Again, the advantage of this is you can take advantage of Microsoft's vast network of data centers and networking infrastructure. It all starts with getting started, and this will take you through to a document on learn.microsoft.com, and it will basically say, hey, you need to go and onboard a device. So this is an agent. You just simply download the agent onto the Windows 10 or 11 device. Andy, will there be other devices or platforms supported? Absolutely. These will be rolled out in not too distant future, actually. So once you've onboarded that device, then it's a case of starting to get configuration. So once the device becomes active and the user is signed in, your dashboard here will essentially start to light up. So what can you do with this experience? Well, you can provide, for example, quick access to network resources on your network. So you can give a network a name, and I can then say, okay, do you want to add in a quick IP address? This can be a FQDN, it can be an IP address range, or an individual IP address. And this can support both IPv4 and IPv6. This can be literally anywhere, by the way, so it doesn't necessarily need to be an on-premises. So once you put in the IP address, the port, what you can then do is you can then configure a new application. So you can onboard a new app. So let's say we've got an app called App 1, and you want to enable this app with the Global Secure Access Client. So in other words, you want to make these apps available for that Windows 10 or Windows 11 device. And you can then specify, hey, only allow that device on this network segment that you just created. So that's really good that you can push out an application to a device on a particular network segment. So once you've done that, the next thing then you've got some global settings here. You can obviously monitor and manage the various sessions here. You've got some tenant restrictions. So if you want to set some tags, you can put some tenant restrictions on your network here for enable tagging, and adaptive access. So if you're using or you want to integrate this with the likes of conditional access, you can switch this on. Once you've integrated it with conditional access, you then get the ability to set policies on obviously those devices and also on those applications. And I'll show you that in a moment. Other things that you can do, you can also create policy profiles. And for the internet access, you can create your own web filtering policies. So for example, only allow certain types of traffic, don't allow access to certain platforms or certain websites and things like that. That's really useful. But as you can see, this is currently only available in the private preview. Now, the other thing that you can also do in here is, as well as things like session management and so on, you can also, if I go into the global settings here, there is an option to, for example, connect. So in the connect, you can go into the likes of traffic forwarding. And this is really where the power of global secure access comes into its own. As I said, you can either deploy this through standard web traffic. You can manage standard web traffic. For example, what the user can access, what websites are forbidden, and so on. But with things like private profiles, you can also direct applications. For example, if you're using branch servers, if you're using infrastructure servers and so on, you can add that. At the moment, for example, the internet option just allows me to go in. I can create a Microsoft 365 profile here, and you can see that it generates 3 plans or 3 policies, which basically allows the traffic through, in this case, Exchange, SharePoint and Common 365 components. But again, there will be more here, and this again will integrate with the likes of conditional access. And you can link it, as you can see, with conditional access policies, and then you assign it to a number of devices. So that's super cool. If I click onto the connectors tab here, you can see that this is the app proxy service. Now, application proxy is absolutely awesome. I've talked about deploying apps before. But where app proxy comes into its own, and especially using global secure access, is that if you've got, for example, that old crusty app that you want to replace, but you know it's mission critical, it's really expensive, but you also want to move to the cloud, but still using this old component. So with an application proxy, basically what you do is you download the connector onto the server where the application is running. Once that connector is lit up and it's alive, you'll then create what we call a connector group. This is quite useful if you've got, for example, multiple servers for, let's say, load balancing or clustering, for example. So you can create like a group of servers. And then, of course, you basically add in and configure the apps. Once you publish the apps, you basically publish the apps through the regular Enterprise Applications portal. You grant permissions. And as far as the user is concerned, when they use them, it's completely transparent. So it's absolutely awesome. Of course, you'll be able to come in here and monitor all the audit logs, for example. You're going to have traffic logs here. There's not much happening here, but you get the idea. And again, you've also got things like Microsoft 365 logs. You'll need to switch this on. There is a preview here, of course. And you can also, there are a number of workbooks here as well. Again, these will all be added into the service a little bit later on. But as soon as that private preview comes out, I know it's going to be super exciting. But I also kind of get the feeling it's not going to be cheap, this program either. So there you go, Global Secure Access. So one of my favorite features and an absolute really super important component in Microsoft's Zero Trust strategy is, of course, conditional access. So for this, you can either just extend the menu here, and if I come into protection and you have got you've got conditional access here. So conditional access continues to amaze me every day. We have a number of new features. Again, and these features are constantly being improved on as well. If you go into the policies, I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the templates, but the number of templates is definitely increasing. And some of them are really getting quite sophisticated. I love the ones that go ahead and protect the administrator account. And again, I particularly love the Zero Trust templates. Really important for architects, by the way. Now, in addition to this, if I just go back to conditional access here, the other things that I'm looking at, if I go into the policies, in named locations, this was fairly new as well. You've always been able to add in things like country location, geolocation, but you can now, of course, add in not just IPv4, but you can also add in IPv6 addresses as well. So when you add in an IP address here, it now supports IPv6, which is absolutely awesome because, let's face it, a lot of us are using that. So another feature that seems to be in preview for ages is the custom control feature. So this is where if you're working with a third-party vendor, so for example, third-party SSO and something like that, they will probably provide you with a JSON file, and you can just delete this here, paste in their JSON file, and that will then integrate their app or their device or their component with conditional access. Absolutely, really useful, by the way. Going into the policies themselves, if I just open up a policy, you'll start to see that there are a number of kind of new features, just kind of things are starting to creep in. External users, some additional directory roles that you can bring in as well. Targeting resources, of course, we could always target all cloud apps, selected apps, but in addition now, you've got enhanced user actions, which integrate into HR software. So if you're using HR software, you can create conditional access policies based on those. And here you can see that global secure access preview feature. So again, you can now create conditions and grant permissions based on private internet access, company internal internet access. For example, if you want to block certain websites and things like that. So that is really cool. So you can see here, I can say, yeah, I want to kind of restrict that Microsoft 365 traffic, and I can then set up my conditions based on that. So that is super nice, by the way. So of course you can have any user can join a device in 365, but you might want to configure a conditional access policy. So when the user either registers their information or joins Azure Active Directory, so when that user registers their security information with Entra ID, or they attempt to register or join their device to Entra ID or Intune, it will then kick off this policy. So that's what we mean by the user actions there. That's really useful, by the way. You've also got device platforms. They've still got the whole Windows Phone in there as well, which always kind of makes me giggle. And again, the locations, so any trusted locations. Again, you've got all compliant network locations. So this is currently in preview, and this is the global secure access policy. So once you've switched it on in global secure access, you can then say, hey, you're only allowed to access internet access or these resources because it's compliant. So that's really nice. Finally, we've got filter for devices, which I absolutely love, and I've covered that on previous conditional access videos. Currently in preview is something called monitor, and what this does is it basically monitors the device, and it also monitors the app as well. And again, you can just get an idea. If you don't want to kind of enforce anything restrictively, you can use the monitoring feature. We've also got block downloads as well. And if you've got Defender for Cloud Apps, anything that you've created, you can then add in there as well. All right. So that is kind of some of the new and the cool things in conditional access. One of my favorite features in Microsoft 365, and certainly for security, is Microsoft 365 Defender. The Defender range of products has gone from strength to strength, and when you combine it with the likes of Sentinel, Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Identity, Defender for Cloud Apps, and so on. In the past, they all used to have their own portals, and to be quite frank, it was a bit of a nightmare. So it's really nice to see that everything is now been tightly integrated into 365. So here you've got a one-stop portal to kind of view absolutely everything. So some of the things that are new this month include the attack simulator training now has incorporated SANS. So you can now take some SANS simulator training in here as well, which is absolutely awesome. And that will be included in your subscription. Other things that we've got as well, we've also got some enhanced incidents and alerts, and also threat intelligence has had an update recently. So not only threat intelligence, it's now been integrated into 365, but also into Sentinel, Defender for Endpoint, and so on. And as I've said many times before, when you're looking for alerts and potential issues, here you can see that this has been completely redesigned. Everything has been nicely categorized so that you can find your way around. So it clearly shows you the types of vulnerabilities that you can expect, and ultimately if you want to know more about these, or if you're a consultant and you want to do a little bit more research, you can click on the vulnerability. You've got a full report here. You can see if any of your assets have been impacted. You can see the analyst's report here as well, which gives you a full rundown of exactly how this attack works. You can see if you have any related incidents, if you've got impacted assets, and of course the all-important recommended actions. And the recommended actions obviously integrate into the likes of the secure score. So your secure score, again, been enhanced here, categorized in different sections. Again, depending on the products that you have, this may increase, but it's all about zero trust and improving your overall secure stance. Up next, we're going to talk about compliance, and one of the most important features of compliance, of course, is data lifecycle management. And of course, you can come into here, you can put in what we call retention labels to protect all of your content in Microsoft 365. This has been in Microsoft 365 for many years. This is Exchange, of course, and these are the Exchange retention policies, or what we call retention tags. And by default, you get a default mailbox retention policy. And that default policy contains a number of tags. And you can go ahead, you can create your own retention tags if you want to. Now, typically, the way this worked in the past is that you would typically go into the likes of Microsoft Outlook. So if I just, let's say, open up Outlook here, and here in Outlook, of course, you would select an email. I would right-click that email, and if you go into the advanced action, of course, you could assign a retention tag. Well, something that's new, Microsoft have just announced it. You can now go into a folder here in Exchange, and again, that menu option is here now as well. So not only can you assign a retention tag to an individual email, but you can also assign a retention tag to a folder as well. How cool is that? Now, in addition to that, one of my real favorite features of compliance, of course, is dealing with the likes of insider risks. So insiders are potential or potentially malicious people for one reason or another. They may want to steal data, industrial espionage. It's a real threat potentially. Now, in the past, you can come in here and you can create specific policies based on specific rules. So, for example, leavers leaving your organization. But we have a feature currently in preview called adaptive protection. And this is super cool. So to do this, basically what you need to do is create what we call adaptive scopes. So I'm going to come up here into roles and scopes. I'm going to come into active scopes or adaptive scopes. So I'm going to come in here to adaptive scopes, and you can see that I can go ahead and I can create a scope. So at the moment, I've created a number of scopes, and we can simply go into these and we can edit them. So you can see I've given the name. And something else that's new, and it's starting to come in now, is that you can now grant a scope to not just the entire organization, but also to an individual administrative unit as well. So if you don't do anything by default, it will affect every single user in the directory. But of course you can restrict that to a specific administrative unit as well. So you simply go next, you click on what type of scope that you want to create. So is it for users? Is it for a particular SharePoint site or some Microsoft 365 groups? And this is where you basically set your rules. So in this case, I've said, okay, if the city is equal to Manchester and the department is equal to sales, then this scope will in fact apply. How cool is that? So what that means now is when you have created many of these rules, so things like data loss prevention policies, things like information protection, things like information barriers, but specifically things like insider risk management, when you create that policy, you can base it on that adaptive scope. Okay, so basically it will affect anyone in Manchester in the sales department. How cool is that? That is such a powerful feature, and it's a dynamic feature as well. So definitely check out adaptive scopes. So there you have it. What's new and cool in Microsoft 365 security and compliance? Hey, listen, I really hope that you enjoyed that. If you did, bump the like button up there. It does make a difference. And if you've not subscribed, well, come on board. Come and join the learning community that I'm trying to build. Bump the subscribe button, ring that bell, and come and join us. Questions and comments, as always, get those down below. Just a reminder, there'll be an extended version of this episode for everybody who is on our Patreon site. So definitely go ahead and check that out afterwards. And if you want to join the Patreon, there you go. There's the details there. And for now, thanks so much for joining me, and I will see you next time. Take care. Hey, thanks so much for dropping by today. Here's a couple of videos that you may enjoy, and while you're here, go ahead, click on the subscribe button and you won't miss out.